I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. Everything I do so instinctive.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, degenerate sleuths of the night. We gather to boldly go where others have refused. Welcome to the DT show, you salty mofos.
A man accused of killing 4 college students is behind bars, and he has ties to northeastern and central Pennsylvania. State police say 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger was arrested this morning at a home in Chestnut Hill Township.
I can't find any case law that would support that idea. That somehow a warrant would be needed for DNA left at a crime scene.
We are expected to learn more about the allegations against the girlfriend of a Boston police officer who was found unresponsive in the snow Saturday morning. I-Team sources say Karen Reed was in a relationship with John O'Keefe. She's facing charges including motor vehicle homicide and manslaughter.
So, the Commonwealth just provided the court with information that causes me grave concern. The implications of that information may have profound effects on this defense and defense counsel.
So, get your popcorn ready and your choice of drink. Get your butt on your seat. Like, comment, and subscribe for a treat. Here we go. It's time for the show. The Drunk Turkey Show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. It's been a few days since I've seen you guys. I've been typically going back to back here recently, and took a couple of days off. We had a big storm out here in Texas last night. I was actually talking about the Steelers last night, and I was on the podcast, and boom, power went out. And well, I think everything's working. Give me a like button if I sound all right, if you can hear me. This is the first test since then, so let me know in the comment section as well. Today we're gonna transition or change gears, so to speak, and talk a little bit different case. You know, typically we've been talking a lot about the Bryan Kohberger case, and today we're going to talk and dive into the Karen Reed case. And this trial has been full on. I think they have entered week 5. I believe they're on their last witness for the prosecution or the Commonwealth. I think is what it's called there in the state of Massachusetts. Wait, you know what? I might be wrong there. I was thinking maybe Pennsylvania. Well, anyways, so the state has their last witness on, and I think there's been a couple of witnesses that have come on so far that I think have been explosive. The brain surgeon, I think, was huge for the prosecution. You know, I know a lot of people, including Karen Reed, comes out and says something to the effect that, oh, he's not a a pathologist that's going to go in there and do autopsies and things of that nature. But his studies was the brain, and what he was referencing in his testimony was the brain injuries and how John O'Keefe's face and the injuries that he had to his eyes were consistent with a person hitting their head on the ground. And so since then, I think this witness today, Dr. Judson Welcher, I think these have been the best witnesses for the state up to this point to prove their case against Karen Reed. And I thought they put an excellent presentation today, 140 plus pages document. And well, I want to break it down. We're going to break down a few of the things that happened today in court, talk about some of the things that have happened previously up to this point. Now, I do want to say I didn't watch the first trial, but I have watched every second of this trial. So I'm pretty well up to date on it to a certain extent. Obviously, I don't know about all the conspiracy stuff and whatnot, and I understand that there's a lot of concern and a lot of things, I guess, that happened in the first trial. I'll be honest with you guys, as a person that didn't watch the first trial, this one seems very strong in favor of the state. You know, Karen Reed's own words, I think, outside of the testimony, has really, really, really done her in on this in this hearing. And, you know, for whatever it's worth, I just find it odd that she even did those interviews, because I think she would have had a much stronger case, you know, had those interviews not come out, and she kept her mouth silent, kept her mouth shut, remained silent, because, you know, her story has changed quite a few times within the interviews that she's given. And I think that she's talked a lot more than she probably should have, which is odd because she did a lot of those interviews with her lawyers present. And so, yeah, it is what it is. So that right there, I think, is probably the most damning thing as well. But today, it was about the evidence. And like I said, where I was going with that was, in the first trial, I get it. You know, I may have even you know, been like, hey, things look weird. I wouldn't be with you now because I follow the evidence. You know, if the evidence goes one way, I follow the evidence. I don't follow the narrative. I don't stick to a narrative. And so I'd still be where I'm at today had I seen the first trial, no doubt, 100%, because like I said, I follow the evidence. And today was all about the evidence. But let's I pulled up some pieces. We'll talk about those pieces and then we'll go into it. But let's figure out who this expert witness, Dr. Judson Welcher, is.
Absolutely. My name is Judson Welcher. My first name is Judson. Last name is Welcher, Welcher.
Sir, what do you do for a profession?
I'm an accident reconstructionist and biomechanical engineer.
I'd like you to explain to us a little bit about what an accident reconstructionist does.
Sure. You can think of accident reconstruction, things such as this, as the physics and engineering that happens in car crashes. So accident reconstruction tends to deal with everything that happens to the car and outside the car, skid marks, vehicle damage, the electronic recording systems in the vehicle, things that have to do with the motion forces and how the physics of everything occurred and how that affected the motion of the vehicles.
You said that you were an accident reconstructionist, but also a biomechanical engineer. How is your work as a biomechanical engineer different than an accident reconstructionist?
So simply, you can think of biomechanics as similar, but to everything inside the car. So biomechanics is looking at how the effects of physical forces are applied to the human anatomy. When I'm trying to explain to somebody what I do, I say, hey, it's like a civil engineer who's designing a bridge. So many trucks and cars on the bridge. Are that going to cause the beams in the bridge to fail? Is that going to cause the cables to fail? So a human body is governed by the same laws of physics, just like the bridge. Obviously, it's made of a lot of different materials, but in a human body, my beams are bones. My cables are the muscles and ligaments. Different material properties, but everything's governed by the laws of physics and principles of engineering. So I'm looking at how physical forces, the outside of the car, when people are inside the car, seatbelts, airbags. The first seatbelt was patented by an engineer. It's engineers who quantify the force of the crash and what kind of injury damage there is to the body. So it is force that causes damage like a fracture. And so we're looking at how the physical forces are applied to the body and what that means in terms of what happens to the body.
All right. So I wouldn't have been able to have explained it a lot better than he could. So I wanted to bring it up. So this is what he does. This is who he is. He is a doctor. He has the background. Now, early on in this trial, or before this trial started, you know, I started looking at the evidence and people were questioning me on a few things. And one of the things that they questioned me on was the accident aspect of it. Like, you know, how did the body look, and how did the injuries, how are those a result of a car accident? And when I looked at the injuries and I looked at the scene and I looked at the vehicle, I immediately came up with a scenario where John O'Keefe was sideswiped and clipped, and that he rolled off the side of the car. Now, I've investigated a lot of accidents in my career, and I've also investigated several fatality accidents. And so I have experience in that. And I was quickly told, no, you know, the crash daddies and this and that, they said that it's impossible. And I'm like, well, I don't know what the crash daddy said. And I still don't know what they said. They haven't testified, and I haven't seen the first trial. I know of a little bit of the things that they've said. I know that there was something about a potato gun. I know there was something about that The taillight couldn't have cracked if the vehicle was traveling under 3 miles an hour. But that's basically it. I think they also said that the injuries weren't consistent with somebody with a collision, but I don't know what they meant by the collision aspect. If they meant a full-fledged collision, somebody getting impacted in the middle of the vehicle, which is completely separate and different than somebody getting sideswiped. But I initially thought that it felt like this guy turned and rolled. But I was quickly told, the crash daddies and their experience. And well, I knew that the Commonwealth apparently had only used a trooper who was experienced in accidents and accident reconstruction. And it's a common thing for most departments to utilize an officer that's trained in accident reconstruction. And typically that's all you need. Back to like what Karen Reed was saying when she said that the brain surgeon isn't the pathologist. Well, the trooper is the accident reconstruction person. He would be considered the pathologist, and this man here would be considered the brain surgeon. Now they're using the brain surgeon because obviously the defense is now using ARCA, and they have their experts, so now they have to combat with experts of the same equivalence, doctors in the field, etc. And so they paid a lot for this. This wasn't cheap. It was his services. We're going to find out that he's doing things that ARCA didn't do. That's one of the other things that I knew that ARCA didn't do was they never saw the vehicle. And the reason I know that is because of the voir dire that occurred earlier in this pre-trial or trial settings. I saw that aspect of it. And I saw how ARCA had basically given advice to the defense on what not to ask, and also basically told them that they would stay away from certain topics like pedestrians being struck at night, things of that nature. And they would stay away from those type of testimonies because it would go against the narrative that the defense was trying to put out there. And then there was also the payment thing of about almost $24,000, etc. So I saw that, and I saw what Judge I can't Bev. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I don't remember how to pronounce her last name. I have a dog called Capone, and that's what I want to say, and I know it's not it. And so I apologize for that. But I saw what the judge had said to the defense about their witness and about what had occurred and how it was an ambush and how she was going to allow a robust cross. And I'm expecting to see that, and I'm expecting some of the same terminology that the judge said in that voir dire to be used. I mean, how is the defense going to object to terminology that the judge used? You know what I'm saying? So I know that, for instance, ARCA didn't look at the scene. They didn't come down. They didn't look at the vehicle. And what this guy did was not only did he look at the vehicle, but he also purchased another vehicle matching the same as Karen Reed's so that they can do their experiments. And fantastic job. But let's fast forward to that part. So 4650.
The first is your office is in California.
Oh, yes, sir.
Why was it important to come all the way out here and view the scene firsthand?
And you want to have as much information as possible. So I wanted to, physically look at all the things so I can actually see with my own hands, my own eyes, lay hands upon it, look at it as best I can. You try and inspect and look at as many things as you possibly can. Sometimes they don't exist anymore. Sometimes they're gone. And you have to make a best approximation if you can't do that. In this case, I was able to look at the scene and both vehicles.
Was that an important part of your study, Doctor?
I think so. Again, it's always good if you're going to talk about what happened to the cars or what happened to the people to look at what happened to the cars, meaning to actually look at the cars, not just look at photographs when possible. So I have physically looked at the cars. For example, on the Lexus, I climbed in it, over it, underneath it. I downloaded data from it. I did a whole bunch of things looking at Ms. Reed's Lexus to assist in my analysis to try and add some further objective data to what we're doing here. So same thing with Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle. Looked at the rear bumper, took some pieces off the rear bumper to see what was behind the cover, to see what kind of damage we did or didn't have. So,
I mean, that's huge. How are you going to go in there and testify that with a certain degree of certainty about anything if you never actually looked at the vehicle, if you didn't actually look underneath the bumper, as he said, to see what the damage is to the undercarriage or to underneath the bumper? I mean, he's making perfect sense here. I don't understand, you know, and I see Shar saying, you know, the Commonwealth had access to him. I get it, they did, but the Commonwealth didn't pay him $24,000, and ARCA was the ones that were giving him advice. And then when testified and asked if they spoke about those things, they lied on the stand. That is what happened. I mean, I can't. What do you want me to say about that? They lied on the stand. They perjured themselves. They said that they had never spoken outside of locations on where to, you know, sleep, hotels, rooms, bathrooms, stuff like that. And yet that ended up not being the case whatsoever. So yeah, they lied quite a bit. And I'm expecting a very, very robust cross when this comes through. And I believe Dr. Welcher here is going to be coming back as a rebuttal witness for ARCA. So I'm excited to see what it is that they have to say in those scenarios. It should be interesting, needless to say. But I agree. How can you go in there and make any educated degree of certainty, anything, opinion based on those things if you've never even looked at the car itself? You don't know. And it's important to look at the car itself, because he's going to show the devil is in the details, including a scuff mark on the side of the SUV that would have came from John O'Keefe's side of his pants. That matched up pretty close, if not perfect, when we look at this experiment that they do. It's pretty remarkable. It's the devil in the details that's going to get you. And those type of details that can only be done and only be seen if you're actually going out there and looking. If you're going to be lazy and you look at a couple of pictures, whether it's ARCA or it's the dog bite person lady, Dr. Russell, I believe is her name. well, they're in for a big one. But let's continue this.
Went to the scene, look at the measurements of the curb, look at where some of the lines are on the road, because you can see them in some of the photographs. Again, it's always good when possible to inspect everything you can inspect.
If you could now begin and tell us how you started your investigation.
Sure. So on September 23rd, I had an opportunity to come out. Mr. Brandon, was the first time I ever met you on that day, I believe. And I had to receive material before that. And what you see here is, this is my inspection of Miss Reed's vehicle. In the upper left photograph, you'll see, oh, this doesn't work very well. Upper left photograph.
And when it comes to ARCA, I think one of those doctors or one of those persons that worked for ARCA was stand up. There's only one guy that I think is a liar and purged himself on the stand, by the way.
That's Miss Reed's vehicle. That's Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle, the Chevy Traverse. And then what you see here is a laser scanner. You can see it on the ground here. Laser scanner is creating a 3D model of the vehicles. So I use that to create a 3D model of the vehicles. You can see me in the upper right photograph. That watch is this watch right here, my Garmin watch. And what I'm doing is looking at the construction composition of that right rear corner of the bumper. I'm looking at things such as the dimensions, where various lights and components are, and how does the geometry of that bumper relate to things that would be hit when backed into.
Beautiful. You can't explain this anymore better than this, in my opinion. They do some laser stuff as well, so that way they can pinpoint, because a lot of the defense is going to say is that the taillight is broken. They've come to that agreement that the taillight is broken, but their agreement is that the taillight is broken because they backed into John's car, right? That she backed into John's car. And what this accident reconstruction expert does is he proves that the taillight wouldn't have been where the vehicle would have collided. In fact, as you can see right here at the bottom part of the bumper where the actual bumper would have collided, there is another small red plastic taillight. A reflector, maybe, possibly. I'm not familiar with this vehicle, but he calls it a taillight. I'm assuming it's a small taillight as well. And that one's not broken or cracked. Devil's in the details, guys. Devil in the details.
Dr. Welcher notes this is 9/23/94. Is that an accurate date of when you came and first started looking at the vehicles in the area?
You said 24, correct?
I did.
You said 9/23/24, correct. And then on the slide, what I tried to do is underline what I'm doing. So this is inspection of the Reed Lexus. And as noted, I'm only showing you a couple. I actually took 445 photographs.
Do you remember when you began this case?
445 photographs that he took himself of this vehicle. He did the work.
The month of the date?
No, it was obviously before this. I had material before I came out to look at the vehicles.
You think it was months before this?
I don't think it was months. No, it was maybe a month, if not less.
So you began your work in the fall of 2024?
Correct.
And I just want to ask you about the picture in the middle. You see the right taillight housing is missing. Did you
Correct.
understand that had been removed prior to you looking at the car?
It was, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. However, some of the evidence stickers, these white stickers here, were still on the vehicle.
You did not place those. Did you place those stickers on yourself?
I did not.
Were they there when you first saw the car?
Correct. They match what I'd seen in other photos.
Thank you.
So just continue.
I watched a car wreck at 35 miles an hour against a stopped vehicle, and the vehicle was totaled on impact. Yeah, but I think this vehicle was reversing at less than 1 mile per hour. So that's the other thing too, right? And ARCA said you couldn't break that taillight if you weren't going over 3. So even their own defense witness, if he's going to go out there and say that, oh yeah, no, that could have done it, then he's going to impeach himself, or he's going to get impeached there on the stand. Go for it, my man. Go for it. But yeah, I've seen a lot of different accidents, guys. You can't correlate what you've seen in one accident and try to correlate it with another. It's just, you can't. There's too many variables. There's too many different types of things that go into those type of situations. I've seen a person get hit going, I think it's like 4 or 5 miles an hour. Somebody was going in reverse, hit somebody, and they hit the head on the ground, just similar to what happened to John, and died on the scene. I've seen a guy get hit by an 18-wheeler and survive it. And so he was walking across the street, and 18-wheeler jackknife hit him at the back tail end of the rig, flung him like 150 feet or something like that. Shoes one way, dentures another way, broken bones, twisted up, and he survived that one. I've seen tremendous amount of and I know that a lot of people think, well, maybe perhaps if it doesn't look that severe, maybe it's not that severe. Go look at any type of hits, on the body. Go look at what took Michael Irvin's career out. It wasn't a very big injury to Michael Irvin. He went down and, he hit his head and snapped, broke his neck. But if you look at the play, it didn't look like he had a hard impact or any of those things. So the speed of the vehicle, which they talk about, and the area in which John was hit, I mean, it all pretty much matches up, which is also something that I was saying very far in the beginning. I even indicated, now I know you got to be on the member side to get on the Discord to see this, but I told everybody a few weeks ago, maybe a little bit longer than that we're going to see some experiments with paint. And then we're also going to see an experiment that's going to prove that John O'Keefe's car did not cause the damage to O'Girl's Lexus. And let's go into that. Let's look at that right now. Let's go into that experiment that they did. It is quite impressive.
The scene, for example, or to Mr. O'Keefe's residence, you can take these computer models and additional data and put it back in the computer and reconstruct everything on the computer. So before we had the exact angle of impact, again, this is for looking at when Ms. Reed contacted Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle, backing out of Mr. O'Keefe's garage at One Meadows. I lined them up just to generally show the approximate location. A couple things, notice how, again, this lower portion of the Lexus bumper sticks out. Notice how the side of the Chevrolet slopes in as you get higher up. So this portion sticks out more.
So what they're trying to say is that the bottom ends of these bumpers stick out further than the top part of these cars. And you can see them both, that on the Lexus, it's curving upward and inward. And then at the bottom, you see the bumper out. Also the same thing, the bumper protruding from the bottom end of the SUV. So basically that's what he's trying to say, is that the point of impact would be the part that's sticking out the furthest, which would be this part of the bumper down here for the Lexus, with the bottom part of the bumper of John's SUV on his Chevy SUV, where coincidentally, if you look here, you see the, let me make this bigger for you guys. If you guys look right here, you see this taillight piece. This piece would have came in, had more contact than anything up here because of the curvature of the vehicle. And yet that's not broken. It's not broken.
More than this portion. And this is where you would expect any contact damage to occur, assuming there was an impact. So again, looking at the measurements up the height of the vehicle, of course, as you indicated, Mr. Brandon, the taillight's gone. And then went to the scene. So same thing, went to the scene, took, again, 297 photographs of the scene, had our people scan it to create a computer model of the scene. So, literally, if you want to know the distance from this window to, say, some manhole cover on the road.
And so what this is, and what they did with the vehicles too, is when they had them out there, and I didn't show this part, but they did a 3D scan of both vehicles and of the area, so that way they can compose and do their little experiment that I'm going to show here in a second. Now, what they're going to go into next is going to be they looked at mileage, key cycles, stuff like that, but it's not really what we're going to be talking about today. All that was just to prove that it was her driving around there. Let me see. Okay. Let me pull up where they actually do the experiments real quick. While I do that, I want to say what's going on to Frenchie84 for being a member for 11 months. Please hit the like button, guys. Subscribe. Ring that notification bell. You guys know what to do. All righty. So they talk about, he goes into specifically about the 3-point turn, and what they were doing is they were trying to, I guess, get an exact time point between the Lexus's time. So the way the Lexus keeps its time is through its key cycles, right? So they know that after X amount of minutes from when it was started, this occurred or that occurred, right? And they were able to tie in John O'Keefe's phone and the tech data from the vehicle to determine an exact time point when that 3-point turn occurred. And that 8 minutes later, another event occurred, which was Karen Reed accelerating at over 70% in reverse on the accelerator. I mean, there's your murder too, guys. To be honest with you. You know, I know that a lot of people say, well, you know, you can't prove intent or whatever. Could have been this, could have been that. I mean, she put it in reverse. She went forward 30 some feet and then popped it in reverse and went back the 30 some feet plus an additional 53 feet. So she went in reverse like 87 feet or something like that at over 70% of the accelerator pressed. I think she reached somewhere around like 23 miles an hour or something of that nature. And a lot of people will say, oh, that's, you know, who can go fast? Man, I've driven 45, 50 miles an hour in reverse, do it through a police course. Vehicles can definitely do that. And it's not that difficult. And an SUV, remember, it's at 12 something in the morning. There was, what did they say? The snow out there would have been enough to track a cat, maybe, possibly. So it wasn't like it was the worst conditions in that moment. Not like what we saw on the body cam footage at 6 o'clock in the morning, where you hear the wind howling. You can't even hear people talking in front of the car, right? Because of how bad the wind and the storm is. And people are all like, well, you know, people inside the house that were dead asleep from being drunk. You question why they didn't wake up. It's ridiculous, to be honest with you. But at 12:33, it was light dusting of snow. So it's not like she was driving in a blizzard type of weather conditions. You know what I'm saying? So let's see. But going in reverse, popping in reverse, going at over 80 feet in reverse at 70% of the throttle pressed. Plus, you also have the fact that she calls Carrie Roberts and says John is dead. She calls and contacts the hospitals after that call, which is proof that that's what she was told, because now she's concerned because something happened. So she's calling the hospitals, you know. She's leaving a voicemail on John's phone before she even made any phone call, saying, John, no one knows where you're at. You know, I don't know where you're at, you know, and no one else knows where you're at. How does she know that no one knows where he's at? How does she know that Jen McCabe or Brian Albert or any of these other guys, pick your favorite, you know, suspect, you know, for your free Karen Reed folk? How does she know that they don't know where he's at? I mean, that sounds like prior knowledge to me. Right. And this is before she goes back out there. She's also the ones that spots him. Now, at this time, I mean, conditions are crazy. This was supposedly the worst blizzard in the history of the month of January for that area. Come on now. You know, you expect her to be able to see through a blizzard with the conditions, visual conditions the way they were. I mean, everybody else, you know, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But there's a second trigger, and that trigger is 8 minutes after that 3-point turn. And it just so happens that when that occurs and they align it with John's phone, I think there's like a matter of like 4 seconds there where John's not moving or something like that, where that's where John's last movement is made. I mean, it is extremely compelling, but I understand what the evidence is showing. I hope you guys are understanding what I'm saying. All right, let's go to this trigger event, and then we're going to go to John's car, but I'm going to try to keep this in order in which the time that we have here.
Highlighted that in yellow. So we're now talking about the second trigger. So this is on the same ignition cycle. It's on ignition cycle 1162. We have that same continuous running clock, but we've now synced it to real world clocks. So instead of the running clock, we now have some information on the real world clock. So at this time, we know the ignition has been on for 19 minutes and 2 seconds. So at the trigger, 19 minutes and 2 seconds. And again, we have 5 seconds either side of that. So between 18 minutes, 57.6 seconds to 19 minutes, 7.5 seconds.
Could you enlarge that, please?
Which part?
That part where your arrow is. You were speaking about the clock. Could you explain that so the jury can see?
Sure. So again, this is continuous from when the time comes on. I just converted it to minutes and seconds here, so you can see how long it's been on. This is the mileage. These are the speeds over here. And this is some information on how far it traveled. Again, we have the plus minus on the steering. That gives us some information on the steering. Really, there's very little steering going on at this point. Slight leftward steer.
Dr. Welcher, did you determine how long after the first trigger, that 3-point turn, that this second trigger occurred?
Yes. 3-point turn occurred about 8 minutes after.
You said the 3-point turn occurred
I'm
after?
sorry, this event, I misspoke. 11.2 occurred about 8 minutes after.
After the 3-point turn?
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, let me fast forward to the 70%. I know a lot of free Karen Reed folk don't want to listen to this part. They might be jumping out soon.
Miles an hour. And you can see.
They can back it up. And the crazy thing is too, like the defense team, and they remind me a lot of like the Kohberger movement, like where it's cherry pick data. They don't look at the whole context. They don't look at all the evidence, because I think that's also one of the things. Like I'll say something about against Bryan Kohberger, like, oh yeah, the DNA, the car, like I'll break everything down, and then a Kohberger will just shout out at one thing, like, oh well, his phone could have been off because of a number of reasons, and I'm like, well, what about the rest of it? What about the rest of it? And they rely on old data and things of that nature. Like they want to look at the PCA and say, hey, well, the PCA said this and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, well, the PCA was written before he was even arrested. Now, there's a whole investigation that happened afterwards. It's kind of the same thing here. With Karen Reed's case, they want to look at old data that is inaccurate, so that way they can manipulate the accuracies of the data so that they can try to swing it into their favor. For instance, one of the things that they did was like the phone going into the house, supposedly, right? That it was that there was a drop in accuracy, and when that drop in accuracy occurs, there's a snapshot in time for about like 4 seconds when it was possible that phone could have gone in the house. Now, people will point, oh, see, there it is. It's right there. But they don't look into the entire picture. Well, I mean, you think he's going to go downstairs, get beat up? I don't know. How's he getting outside? Because they didn't record any steps going outside. I think I heard somebody say that there was rumors of him getting slingshot outside somehow. You can't make this up. I'm telling you, some of the Kohberger theories are more believable than this. But there's no recorded steps for him getting outside. This snapshot of 4 seconds, they don't look at the whole picture. They want to look at the inaccuracy where you have data that is inaccurate, so that way you can twist it and fit a narrative and not look at the whole picture and really cherry pick the data. But when you look at the whole thing and you look at the entirety, it's pretty obvious. Again, 2 + 2 is 4. I've said this in the Kohberger case, or in Kohberger case. Same thing's going to go here. Some people may not want to see the answer. I understand it. Some people don't like to be wrong. I get it. But this is pretty compelling that this occurred.
Dr. Welcher, when you say the Lexus moved 83 feet total. Is that according to the data, or is that the entirety of the movement of that Lexus?
No, that's just for when the data starts to when the data ends. So if you look at when the data starts, you can see that the vehicle is actually going 13.67 miles an hour. When the data stops, the vehicle is still going 23 miles an hour. And you can see,
I'm sorry.
you can still and see that it's still at 74% throttle. So, this is 3/4 of full throttle in reverse.
So to start with the distance traveled, if you can go to the top, we see that the speed is 13.67. Is that where the data gets picked up?
That's where the first data point is. Again, the trigger is here. This is 5 seconds before the trigger.
Are you able to tell how fast or slow the vehicle is traveling before that data point in 5 seconds before the trigger?
No.
And likewise, on the bottom, the speed. At the end of the 10-second data points, 23.61. Can you tell whether or not that speed stayed the same, increased, or decreased?
I mean, considering you're at 74% throttle, it likely increased. How much, I don't know. And you can see that up here, she's on the brake. Down here, she's not on the brake. And so she's not on the brake and at 74% throttle.
And what is the percentage of throttle that has to be initiated to cause a triggering event?
For a shift into rear and a rapid throttle application, it's 30%.
If you look at the next column over,
That's gotta hurt. That's gotta hurt. Let's see. I got putting it all together.
there's something else you want to point out to the jury on this slide.
No, I'm good.
Next.
So similarly, using this information to then try to tie it back to the cell phone data to make sure we have the real-time information. Again, this was written back in January before I got the additional information. So what you can see is, I'll zoom in. Again, we're now talking about trigger 1162.2. We know that that's 18 minutes that the vehicle has been on, 18 minutes, 57 seconds, 19 minutes, 2 seconds. This is the range. Again, the plus or minus 5 seconds. 19 minutes, 2 seconds is when the trigger occurred. Infotainment system, adding those two together, 12:12:36, plus the 19:7.5 indicates the end of 1162-2 is at 12:31:43.
That 12:31:43, is it based on the Lexus clock from the infotainment system?
It is. It would need to be corrected to the O'Keefe cell phone data.
And when you reconcile that variance of 21.9 seconds, what is the time?
You end up with 12:32:04. So if you simply take this and add 21 seconds to it and add 29 seconds to it, so you get between 12:32:04 and 12:32:12.
When you reconcile the two clocks and you have that range of 12:32:04 to 12:32:14.
12:32:12.
I'm sorry, 12:32:12. Does that simply accommodate the window of data, but not before and after?
Correct. So, again, even on John's O'Keefe cell phone, even within his cell phone, there's somewhere between 21 to 29 seconds difference on his cell phone. So even that one piece of instrumentation has some variance to it. So we know it's between 21 to 29 seconds at this approximate time. So this is taking into account that variance.
So basically, all in all, around the time that John O'Keefe stopped moving is around the exact same time that Karen Reed's car did the 74% throttle in reverse. Damaged tail light pieces, micro pieces in the sweater, DNA on the vehicle. It's only going to get worse for her. I mean, this was just the beginning part of it. In my opinion, the what do you call it? Oh, wrong button. Oh man, I think I hit the wrong one. Give me a second, guys. Where is my screen at? All right. Okay, bear with me, guys. I need to pull up part 2 real quick. But so far, all in all, I think that was an excellent. So far, the first half of that was excellent. It gets worse for Karen Reed, to be honest with you. He's gonna go in now and really break down and take apart her case. Let's pull it up. Now, this is the part we're going to watch now is going to be the experiment that he did to show and prove that this right here did not cause the damage to Karen Reed's vehicle. Now, let me pull this up first. You guys might remember this. Now, this is actually that about to happen right there. Now, I took these pictures some time ago. I did this to show that there's the vehicle here. John O'Keefe's car. This is after Karen Reed's vehicle is leaving. You can see there are no red pieces of of glass on the ground. This is a tail light in the sally port. I know a lot of people looked at this like corner here and said, oh, it's not there. It's not there. It's there. There's a piece right there. And this part right here emits red. A lot of people were looking at this piece of tail light as the piece that went right here because this curved. But as you can see right here, this piece is still there. And they were looking at this curve saying, oh, that's the same piece. It's not. It's not. That piece actually goes right here. This piece goes right here. Now, right there, as you can see, there's some fins, which I think are going to come out to be pretty important here in a little bit when you look at the abrasions on John O'Keefe's arms. They kind of line up right where those fins are, and probably the same length or distance in between. But yeah, this piece, there's no fins. There are no fins there. There's nothing there. These are the fins I'm referring to. This one and this one, right above where the live chat is. So that's not there. In fact, this is the piece with the fins, right? This piece is the piece that that was in the snow. It's right here. And this one was found by the CERT team, SRT team. As you can see, it's right here. Follow the blue line. It's right here, right underneath the reverse light. Okay. And as you can see, that piece is already missing at 5:23 a.m. when she's leaving out there. This is before Proctor ever got his hands on this vehicle. Before Proctor even knew, before anybody even knew John was dead, except for Karen Reed. She was the only one that knew about this. And that piece that is closest to the tailgate is missing already right here. And where was it? That's found over here where John's body was. All right, connecting some dots, guys. Are things starting to click? Are the gears moving? No red pieces underneath. You can see it even better here. It's missing right there. All of it is missing. And then as she breaks further down the line, you can see that it's missing there as well. Now, we're going to get to this one in a minute. But let's get back to the experiment.
So Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle. I don't know if you noticed, but there actually is contact between the vehicles. So one of the first things we wanted to do is determine the frame rate, which is how many video frames are played per second. Your normal kind of video camera has about 30 frames per second. Your standard movie is 25 frames a second. You know, a modern IMAX is like 60 frames a second.
So they do all that to basically try to figure out how fast the vehicle is going. I just want to fast forward through that. They did the frame rate, and they can determine based on the frame rate, the speed of the vehicle.
So we have some information now on the time between each frame. So here's frame 0. This is frame 265. We're 13 seconds into it. Here's frame 305. Notice you see brake lights on the back wall here. Notice how they're not super red because you still have reverse lights on. Now they all go off. So the Lexus brake lights have been turned off at frame 353. 356. Lexus brake lights begin to come on. 357, they're back on. Lexus comes to a complete stop at frame 369. 384, the reverse lights turn off. So now look how red this is because we no longer have the white reverse lights in it. And you can see the Lexus starts to drive forward. So frame 825, this is after the Lexus has left the scene. But notice the tracks in the snow. So we have very definitive locations for the wheels.
And remember, they did a 3D scan of the entire area. They have a 3D scan, and they're going to show what their 3D scan was going to do. But the positioning of the vehicle, their access to the vehicle to park John O'Keefe's vehicle, knowing where this vehicle was with relativity to where the tire marks are, and also the positioning of the camera, knowing that this vehicle is coming out of the garage, they can, with their instruments, determine exactly what part of the vehicle touched John O'Keefe's car. The fact that these snow tracks were there really, really helped out the case here.
Of the Lexus. We lay over a grid on the various frames. So we then took the images and did what's called clarification, which is where you overlay images from multiple versions or multiple views of the same vehicle, and it helps sharpen the image, but it slightly dulls the color. So you get a little cleaner, crisper image. So here's Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle before clarification, after clarification.
Excuse me, Your Honor, pardon my interruption. Can you get numbers of the slides as you're typing back and forth?
Sure. Absolutely. Okay, I'll make an effort. So slide 76. You're welcome. Going to slide 77. We're going to focus in on this area here. So what we will actually show is where the snow was displaced in these two spots, spots right across from here and right across from here. You could focus your attention on those. Slide 77. So slide 78. To bring us all together, we went out to Mr. O'Keefe's residence and took a scan, a laser scan. So you see the laser scanner over here. Laser scanner is right here. Fence hasn't changed position. The camera's changed the slight position. We can account for that. So here's the subject video. We have the correct resolution. There's a new camera. It's going slightly faster frame rate. That just means we have different times between frames on the new camera, but we're simply using it for calibration to the old camera. It's the same.
So I'm going to fast forward from some of this jargon to right here.
And this is the new, subject video with the control points overlaid on it. That's a subject video where we're phasing in the laser scans of the scene, 84.
Dang, look.
So this is both on slide 84. I'm just toggling between the point cloud and the video. And what I'm trying to illustrate is how well we were able to overlay the point cloud onto the video data. So for example, if you say watch one of these fence post points up here while I toggle between the video, there's a laser scan, there's the video. So we've done a good job. Again, the residuals show that we've done an adequate job of matching the data. Slide 85. So what I'm doing here is toggling between, this is the video of the car. And remember I told you I went out and I inspected Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle and did a laser scan of it. So we're now taking that laser scan of the video, or excuse me, of the vehicle, and overlaying it onto the car in the video. So this is the video image. That's the laser scan laid on top of it. So we know all the dimensions in the laser scan. We know all the dimensions in the scene of this. We have the tire tracks. We can create and take data points along the tire tracks, create a map of those. So green is the right rear. Again, the vehicle's backing out, coming, slide 87, coming out this direction, backing here, stopping, pulling forward towards the bottom of the screen, backing out here, pulling forward like here. Slide 88. So this is the Lexus lined up. This is when the Lexus has come to a complete stop. This would be maximum engagement. Again, this is just toggling frame 88, showing that we have the time and the frame number. 369 on the same slide. We've now overlaid the Lexus laser scans on top of the image of the Lexus. So there's the video image, a still image that we took from the video. And here's where we overlay the laser scan of the Lexus. So we've overlaid the laser scan of the Lexus onto the Lexus. We've overlaid the laser scan of the Chevrolet onto the Chevrolet. And we've overlaid the laser scan of the scene onto the scene. So now what that allows us to do, we now know the position of everything in there. And we've also tracked the position of the tire tracks. So that's what it looks like if you overlay the computer model of Mr. Reed's vehicle onto the tire tracks. Oh, my apologies, Your Honor. Slide 89. And then I'm just toggling slide 89 where I turn the vehicle off so you can see how the tire positions match up. Another toggle of slide 89, how the tire positions line up with where the end of the snow was. From all that information, again, we lined it up in the video, we lined it up in the scene, we have the two vehicles, we can get the exact position of the vehicles when that Lexus stopped. So when that Lexus stopped, that's going to be the maximum engagement. So from that information, we can get the angle of the vehicle, we can get the degree of overlap, the impact configuration, and it's hard to see because of the angles and because these vehicles are not at right angles to each other, the exact contact. Now, I mentioned, and we're on slide 94 now, that contact on the rear of the Chevy Traverse. So you can see we actually, I mean, you can't see. So we took a whole bunch of data points within those two areas where the snow got dislodged. And we're looking at where that is. So if you look at that on the vehicle, so this is where it is on the rear of Mr. O'Keefe's Chevrolet. You see it's about 25 and a half inches above ground, 32 and a half inches above ground. Here's Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle. So these marks are kind of, this is the Chevy Traverse words, are approximately right here. Again, I had the opportunity to inspect Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle. There's no damage where these marks are. So sure, it knocked the snow off, but it wasn't sufficient to cause damage to his vehicle.
Crazy. So it knocked some snow off. They were able to see on the camera footage where it knocked the snow off at. And they were able to also determine that those are the exact areas where the vehicles would have touched had they touched. I mean, he says there that they did come to contact, but that it was enough to knock the snow off, not enough to damage the vehicle, not enough to even cause a scratch to his Traverse. Now, they want us to believe that contact, and they being the defense, want us to believe that contact is what created that shattered taillight that's missing a large amount of pieces. I think somebody said it's missing some, not a lot. I don't know what you're looking at, because that's a whole taillight there. I mean, from right here to here, it's clear, all the way straight down, all the way around. This part here looks red, but I mean, the angle of the camera, you can't tell. And I know that this light emits red. I looked that up. And so I can't tell you anything about that aspect, but from right here to here, this entire thing is missing 100%. And I mean, you can see it in multiple shots. This one's even better, even clearer shot. That whole thing is missing. And yet all this was able to do is knock the snow off a little bit. Not even enough to scratch, dent, nothing to this vehicle. Yeah, they expect us to believe that it shattered that taillight.
We then map that data onto Miss Reed's vehicle to look at where that height is. So you can see the only contact marks are down at the bumper level. I mentioned how that bumper sticks out. This is exactly where you'd expect it. So the only evidence of contact is nowhere near the upper taillight. I emphasize the word upper taillight because it is right in line with the lower taillight. But yet the lower taillight also was not broken.
Boom, the lower taillight was not broken. All right, let's fast forward this a little bit to 38. I mean, this to me was damning to the defense. I mean, they basically proved that vehicle, and they're going to talk about how fast this vehicle was going. Remember, I think it was ARCA that said that taillight wouldn't be shattered if the vehicle was going less than 3 miles an hour or something like that. I believe that's what they said. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know you guys want to try. Put it in the comment section if I'm wrong.
At the back of Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle.
So referring to this slide, this is after the Lexus has pulled away. Looking in the snow, I see nothing in the snow.
Were you looking for anything in particular?
Of course I was. I was looking for taillight fragments.
In any of the videos that you have that show Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle after the defendant's Lexus touches it, do you ever see any remnants or shards or fragments of taillight on the ground?
I do not.
When you did your analysis and study, trying to include or exclude this touching as the source of damage to the defendant's Lexus rear right taillight, did you consider speed as part of that analysis?
I did. I considered speed, and then again, knowing we have the positions of the vehicle, we looked at the degree of overlap, and there's only about 2 to 3 millimeters of overlap between the vehicles, which is insufficient to cause the taillight that's recessed in from the edge on the right rear of the Lexus to contact the rear of the Chevrolet.
Considering all the data and analysis that you did you come to a conclusion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty whether the right rear taillight of Ms. Reed's Lexus was broken or damaged during the contact with Mr. O'Keefe's car at around 5:07 a.m. on January 29, 2022?
That impact did not break or crack that taillight.
Is that your opinion?
That's my opinion.
Is that to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty?
That's to a high degree of engineering certainty.
Based on a high degree of certainty. Ooh, I mean, you can't beat the facts. You can't beat data. I'd like to see ARCA say that touchage or contact between John O'Keefe's vehicle and Karen Reed's vehicle is what caused that taillight. Let's see if he's willing to purge himself again or impeach himself. I'd be interested to see how far he's willing to take this, because this information, and it's only going to get better. It's only going to get better for the state, not necessarily for Karen Reed. So let's fast forward to the injuries.
Yes, sorry. Slide 105. This is a picture of Mr. O'Keefe's right arm, forearm, hand, and wrist. In anatomy, your arm is defined from your shoulder to your elbow, and then from your elbow to your wrist is your forearm, and then this is your hand. So technically, when you say arm, it really means from your elbow to your shoulder. Most people call this whole thing arm. It's actually the upper extremity. Arm is from shoulder to elbow, elbow to wrist is forearm, and hand. So you can see I wrote arm and forearm. So arm, elbow to shoulder, elbow to wrist is forearm. So looking at the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe's arm, forearm, as well as his hand. So this is me. I'm actually 6 feet, half an inch tall. What you see in the upper right is.
You see, look, I saw this was interesting. Look at where his head is relative to that wing and where John O'Keefe's injuries to his head were. Not saying that's what did it. I don't think he's even saying that's what did it. I think the brain doctor, the one that would know about brain injuries, said it was more consistent with a fall. And so, but you know what? Yeah, because he said that that had it been a blunt force object, that it would have caved in the skull, and that wasn't the case. The skull, it had the fracture on the skull went outward, which was consistent with a fall and hitting your head hard on the ground. So I don't think it was the wing, but interesting thing that they pointed out. And I've seen injuries where somebody's died and not had a broken bone. There's a guy, Derek Thomas, he actually slipped on his head in the shower. He was a wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, and the collision with the bathtub killed him with his head. It wasn't necessarily the accident that killed him or the vehicle that hit him. It was the hit to the ground and his head colliding with the frozen ground that killed him. And so, you know, I know a lot of people will look at these other accidents where somebody gets hit dead straight on, and you're looking at the wrong type of scenarios, which is why this experiment is important. Which I hope that the person that was commenting that in the live chat watches this so they can see what he means.
The coroner's examination report for Mr. O'Keefe. He's 73 inches tall. That's 6 feet 1 inch tall. At this time, I was 220 pounds. Mr. O'Keefe, at the time of this incident, was 216 pounds. So I took measurements of myself. I'm actually wearing the same make and size shoes as Mr. O'Keefe, the same brand of jeans as Mr. O'Keefe, the same brand and size shirt of Mr. O'Keefe. You see the Lexus in the background. We have matched the height to the Lexus. What I'm showing here is both my height, and then keep in mind where the height of this wing is relative to my right eye. So now I'm wearing, in addition to the same shirt and shoes, same type of sweatshirt, and actually the same kind of baseball hat. We tried to determine the exact glass from the Waterfall Grill. Found out they were getting different ones at different times, but I ordered my glass from the same distributor that Waterfall Grill ordered their glasses from. So you can see in my right hand here, I have a glass. Here's a glass. It looks similar. It's from the same location. And then in the lower right photograph, what I've done is I've rolled up my sleeve, taken the sweatshirt off, and I'm going to look at how this contact pattern lines up. So the first set of slides, I'm simply standing next to the Lexus. We know we have a broken taillight. We know how scratches on Mr. O'Keefe's arm. I'm seeing how those may or may not relate to the height and position of the taillight.
Dr. Welcher, if you could back up one slide, I have a question for you. In the middle photograph, at the top of the Lexus, there's like a rim. What do you call that?
I call it a wind wing. I mean, it could be a wing.
Okay, thank you.
Or spoiler. I call it a spoiler.
Air dam would be another. Okay, so I then set about to do a little bit of testing with the Lexus. The first test you're going to see is me just walking backwards or actually sideways into the Lexus. What I've done is I've painted the Lexus right rear taillight with what's called grease paint, kind of sort of like paint, but it doesn't dry. And then I have backed up sideways, side shuffled into the Lexus with my arm out to see what the damage pattern looks like, or basically where.
Look at that. I mean, that's exactly what the injuries look like to John O'Keefe's arm. Now, I believe that the doctor here is about half an inch taller than John O'Keefe. So you might expect some of those injuries to be about half an inch lower on John's arms, which, man, those fins, those two things that I pointed out earlier, they sure do look like they match up with that right there, don't they? And what I'm pointing at for those that can't see is right there near the logo in the top right corner. There's an image there of John O'Keefe's arm, and there's these two scratches, two abrasions that are going across his arm. That is matching up with the two fins that are on the side. Let me pull it up real quick so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Those two fins, in my opinion, caused that. Oh yeah, but this is the other stuff that Free Karen Reed don't want to see. Screenshots or of the car and stuff. And you can see right here where it's normal and where it's not. It's all missing. That's insane. All right. But look at that. Where those fins would have been, is hitting him right in that arm area. There was micro pieces in his there were micro pieces of taillight on his shirt. Go figure. There were pieces on his arm too.
Where
like on the shirt,
someone of Mr. O'Keefe's height's arm would contact the rear taillight. So then what you see is I've shown the photographs again. I show the paint transfer onto my arm. The yellow grease paint on my hand was to show where my hand would hit the taillight. And so just kind of me walking slowly sideways into it, the approximate location of the taillight, and I'll line it up with the broken taillight in a second, lines up with the approximate location of the lacerations on Mr. O'Keefe's arm.
Dr. Welcher, let me ask you a question. When you're engaging in these demonstrations, are you attempting to try to show exactly how Mr. O'Keefe was struck?
No. So we don't know exactly how he was struck. And pedestrian impacts are extremely sensitive to exact angles. And so where exactly your foot is, whether your foot's off the ground, can have an effect on where you end up after that. We just don't have enough information in this case to determine all that information. We know the taillight was broken. We know the glass was broken. We know we have damage to the rear of the Lexus. We know we have lacerations to Mr. O'Keefe's arm. So I'm trying to see if there's any correlation between all those.
Well, can body posture on a clip or a side slight collision change the trajectory or the injury?
Of course.
Can the way somebody moves or reacts before impact change it?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
What are other things that can change the trajectory of the person and the injuries?
So for example, if you get hit and knocked off balance or clipped and knocked off balance, you can take additional steps. That'll affect how far your body travels. If you have one foot on the ground versus the other foot on the ground, affects how the body rotates. If your arm is at 90 degrees or 85 degrees, will affect the kinematics.
You see, this is exactly what I was saying when people were saying, like, hey, there's no this, there's no that, there's no broken bones, there's no that. I expect to see these injuries. Exactly what he's saying. Just the degree of the angle of the arm can change the trajectory of the person and where they're going. If they took a step, if they didn't take a step. There are so much variables that we don't know about because we weren't there. The only person that knows that is Karen Reed on what she did. And she's not talking. She's the only one not talking. Right. I mean, her and another person that's involved in this case that I don't want to get involved in, but they're the ones that aren't talking. So leave it for what it is. All right, let's get back to the second test that they do. This is just as important.
Reduce rotation of the body. So depending on the speed, the higher the speed, the more rotation. So if I may, so slide 111, this is simply showing where I walk sideways, how this lines up with the location of the lacerations on Mr. O'Keefe's arm. Here's the post-contact scuffing on the taillight. Here's a picture of Miss Reed's vehicle.
You can see right here. Look at that, where it's kind of wiped off or on those fins. Telling you guys.
On the right-hand side. So now I said, okay, that was me walking into the car. Let's have the car drive into me. I did this at very low speeds, and you'll see, and we'll show this from two different angles. That's me showing I'm doing test 2.
And that is exactly what I thought happened. It was that the vehicle turned him and flung him into the ground. It wasn't necessarily an impact that was going to be huge. Give causing a tremendous amount of damage. The quarter panel where he got hit too is probably one of the stronger points of the vehicle. And so, that's where a lot of the parts meet. And so that makes it very strong. And, the way and the angle, that was the first thing I said. Now, I know a lot of people, they were pointing at some other things. And it's just like in the Kohberger case, when I point out something and ends up coming out true. It's not that I'm psychic. I'm experienced. I understand these things. I understand what happens. I've investigated these things, but apparently some folks think I don't know what I'm talking about. So maybe I am psychic. I did predict that they were going to use paint to do this. That may have been because I might know some things, but I digress. Now, what he's saying is at just 2 miles an hour. See, the first one, he walked into it. Now at 2 miles an hour, it like sucked him in. Can you imagine 20, 22 miles, 24 miles an hour, how that's going to rotate the body and how it's going to pull him in and suck him in?
This is from a camera that we have pointing down at it. This is the speed. You'll see it's only about a 2 mile an hour impact, but even a 2 mile an hour impact redirects me back and causes me to rotate and take a step.
Yes.
All right, they're going to approach because he went and talked to the guy. So let me fast forward to when that approach was over. Man, they were there for a minute.
So again, this is the view from behind. Just to avoid the confusion, I will start it here.
Which speed is the car traveling?
You can see it. About 2 miles an hour.
Excuse me, Your Honor, that is the objection that we spoke about.
Oh, okay. All right, so that's noted, Mr. Larson.
So similar to the other test, this is the post-contact image of the transfers onto my arm. Actually, the yellow paint you can see from my hand is here. This is from the arm and forearm. Here's the paint transfer pattern.
And that slide number,
I'm
Dr.
sorry,
Welcher?
I'm terrible with that.
That's
Slide
okay.
116 now. It was 115.
Thank you.
Slide 116. What I've done is I've taken these yellow lines to show the extension of the components on the rear of the exemplar Lexus. Then I've done this extension of those same components on the rear of Miss Reed's Lexus and shown how the approximate location of the fractures in the taillight match up with the approximate location of the contact of the arm onto the taillight.
Dr. Welcher, do you have any indication of how Mr. O'Keefe's arm was bent, what angle it was bent at?
Not exactly, but for these to be taillight shard fragments, they would need to be in the area of the taillight, but it could be further up. We know from the police photographs that there was a damage to the rear body panel in the area I'm searching here. So it's possible his arm was a little higher up and the glass hit the rear of the Lexus and caused that damage.
In the bottom right,
Excuse me, Your Honor, objection.
I will strike that last part about the glass.
Thank you.
the purpose of the circle is for what, Dr. Welcher?
To show, in this case, primarily the location of the lacerations up on the arm, the upper part of the arm, and that they match up with the locations of at least the one remaining shard in the rear taillight of Miss Reed's Lexus.
Looking at the picture of the Lexus bottom right middle, are there any marks on the Lexus itself that you took note of?
Yes, on the next slide.
Thank you.
So check this out.
It's
Devil in the
slides.
details. Look at that.
So there, again, this is the evidence marker. There was a horizontal scuff. We know Mr. O'Keefe had blue jean type pants on. There's a scuff in the area that would approximately correspond to hip level for Mr. O'Keefe.
Next slide, please.
Yes, ma'am. 118.
Thank you.
Did you describe what you saw on the bottom right-hand corner photo as well?
I believe, yes, I did. That's the scuff that lines up with the approximate height of Mr. O'Keefe's right hip. So then I included previous image that you've seen, slide 119, with the reconstructed photograph of the rear taillight, showing where some of the fragments are. You can see where those fragments are relative to the curvature of the taillight. They'd be in the area somewhat centered within the region of the two yellow lines on slide 119.
Is there anything about the photograph in the top right-hand corner that's important? If so, could you zoom in and show us?
So again, it's showing that this is when it's, I believe, in the sally port. at the police station showing that scuff on the right rear body panel.
Did you see any similar stuffs in the middle back of the car?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Did you see anything notable?
Why did they object to that? Why did they object to the fact that there was no damage to the middle center? If that's what Alessi and Jackson in the defense are claiming, they're claiming that, or what they're saying is that this was no collision, and that, you know, collisions usually mean a bunch of bones and broken things and damage to cars, and there's none in the middle. You know, well, they're trying to prove a point that this wasn't a center-on collision, that this was a side swipe. They didn't like that one. They didn't like that one at all.
As far as damage to the middle back of this Lexus?
The middle,
Yes,
like back where the doors are,
but with the middle of the back of the car, did you see any similar damage to the middle? or
there
the
was
left?
scuff marks that ran along the bumper.
Okay, continue, please.
So this is showing his jacket he was wearing, that the puncture marks coincide to the marks on his arm. This is from the autopsy report. A couple things it notes: a 0.5 centimeter abrasion on his right lateral knee. He's got a laceration on his right eyelid. That corresponds to the height of that rear wind wing on the back of the Lexus.
Your Honor, I'm going to object.
Sustained.
Thank you.
How tall was Mr. O'Keefe?
73 inches tall, 6'1".
And how high was that wing from the ground on the back of the Lexus?
It was about it's about 5 feet 11 inches, maybe 5 feet 10 and a half.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you notice anything about Mr. O'Keefe's right knee?
Cratchit asked, I've seen videos of people hitting taillights with a hammer and it wouldn't even crack. With the temperature, make it break easier. 100%. I reached out to somebody who is a former homicide detective, now a very high up officer. He's a brass, and probably the highest position you can think of in the department that he works for. And so he was former homicide with the department that I was in several years ago. And I reached out to him and I asked him about the tail light pieces and tail light. And he reached out also to CSI guys and stuff. And yes, 100%. Temperature makes a big difference. There's heat involved with lights and, you know, the freezing temperature and how long it'd been on and things of that nature. 100%. Plus, I mean, we don't know the position of the elbow or the arm, you know, and when it collided and how it caused it. But I mean, if they're hitting with a hammer and it's causing it to not break, right? In perfect conditions. Now, remember that backing up aspect where the defense is claiming that's where the damage came from, that tail light. Well, the vehicle was in a garage, protected from the elements up to that point. And so it wouldn't be the same scenario where somebody might say, well, it was cold. Maybe that's why it broke when it backed up into John's car. Not the same case, because the vehicle was off for a period of time before then. And it was in a garage protected from the elements. And so it's not the same scenario as far as when she was alleged to have hit John O'Keefe. All right. So we're going to go to the end where he wraps this up. A nice bubble for everybody.
I'm reading from my report.
Can you answer without reading from the report?
Probably it's more complete if I read my report.
Any objection, Mr. Leslie?
I do, on this question, Your Honor, reading from a report to this question, second question is the email.
So, you have to read the report.
Okay.
Okay, Dr. Welcher, let me ask you again. Based on your analysis, data available, reviews, study, based on the fact that you are an accident reconstructionist and a biomedical engineer, have you reached an opinion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty whether the defendant's Lexus struck Mr. John O'Keefe on January 29, 2022, around 12:32 a.m.?
Yes.
And could you share the bases of your opinion before I ask you your ultimate opinion?
Sure. So again, you've seen my slide presentation. I've inspected the Lexus. I've looked at where it wasn't damaged. I've inspected the taillight. I got an exemplar Lexus. I ran lower speed contacts to verify that the injury pattern and location on the arm is consistent with the height and orientation of the taillight. I have looked at fracture tolerance data for falling backwards onto hard surfaces. I've looked at the metrics of where his injuries were and what injuries he didn't sustain. I've looked at the cell phone data, and then I've looked at Miss Reed's interviews as well.
Based on all the evidence you considered, could you share with the jury what your opinion is to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty about whether the defendant's Lexus struck Mr. O'Keefe on January 29, 2022, around 12:32 a.m.?
Yes, based on the totality of the evidence, DNA, everything I've talked about, that is consistent with that happening with a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. That is what happened.
That's what happened. You know what? I want to play that again.
Not an exemplar Lexus. I ran lower speed contacts to
I'll
verify
put it
that
in
the
regular
injury
speed too.
pattern and location on the arm is consistent with the height and orientation of the taillight. I have looked at fracture tolerance data for falling backwards onto hard surfaces. I've looked at the metrics of where his injuries were and what injuries he didn't sustain. I've looked at the cell phone data, and then I've looked at Miss Reed's interviews as well.
Based on all the evidence you considered, could you share with the jury what your opinion is to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty about whether the defendant's Lexus struck Mr. O'Keefe on January 29, 2022, around 12:32 a.m.?
Yes, based on the totality of the evidence, DNA, everything I've talked about, that is consistent with that happening with a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. That is what happened.
Boom. That is what happened. The degree of certainty, high certainty, expert certainty, whatever you want to say. No pieces were found until Proctor. But here's the thing. All right. So what did Proctor do? Did he go back in time to 5:23 a.m. and pluck him out of or before then to pluck it out while this vehicle was in the garage? Like, what are you trying to say here? Now, look at the weather. And for those that expect a perfect scene or a perfect investigation in an imperfect scenario like this is just wildly out of your mind. I'm sorry. You are, to expect that all 47 pieces would have been found in the middle of a freaking blizzard is insane. I mean, I covered the Idaho case. You know how many times law enforcement was back out there and that happened inside of a house? Jesus Christ. They found some things after the first night. Not everything when you get to a crime scene is wrapped up in a bow, all your evidence on the table saying, hey, here I am, look at me, time stamped and everything else in between. Come on now, guys, look at the damn snow. You can barely freaking see. It's insane. But like, what did Proctor do? Did he go back in time and pluck this while it was in Karen Reed's garage or in John O'Keefe's garage? This is before anybody even knew that John O'Keefe was dead or that he had been. The only person that knew was Karen Reed because that's what she called and told Carrie Roberts. And remember, she's also left voicemail saying, John, no one knows where you are. And this is before she called anybody. That is prior knowledge of a crime. Her statements have changed. She was the one that was searching out for an out of the relationship with Brian Higgins. Now let's break that down for a second, right? So she was accusing John O'Keefe for being the cheater when she was the one that was reaching out to other people. Now, who is she reaching out to? She reached out to Brian Higgins, and Brian Higgins had John O'Keefe's phone number, so they were at least friendly, right? So this tells you how vindictive this person is. She's reaching out to somebody who knows John O'Keefe in a similar position or in a similar employment, but with a higher tier. He's a federal agent versus a local state cop or a city cop. Big difference, right? Being very vindictive. And then when she talks about, her interactions with him, what does she say? Oh, you don't have kids. I don't have kids. We can do whatever we want, complaining about John and the fact that he had kids and how, life revolved around them and not necessarily her. I mean, this is a clear indication of a very vindictive person. She's the one who's changed her story. She's the one that's lied. She said that she didn't see him go in the house, and then she said she did see him go in the house. Well, which one is it? Which one is it? Her behaviors and her actions before, during, and after the crime are consistent with somebody that committed a crime. I mean, even her attorney, David Yannetti, indicated that this was a horrible accident, that there was no intent. And then they changed their story around. Huh. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't believe in this conspiracy theory. You know, I heard, you know, I didn't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole the first time that this case came out because, you know, I had seen and heard that a lot of people were showing that this case there was some corruption or something like that. And there was a female who had just been, there was some detectives who were arrested for playing a part or a role in grooming her and then taking her life and making it look like she took her own. You know, the feds investigated that and they arrested those people. So you would think that, you know, if they were investigating, you know, same department, same group of people, same everything, you know what I'm saying? Like, why wouldn't they file charges on Proctor and all these other guys if they would have found something? But they didn't. They found nothing. You know, the guy had some text messages about somebody who killed a cop. I mean, I'll be honest with you guys. I arrested a lot of POSs in my day. One of them, and I talk a lot about him because I talked a lot of crap about this dude. He sexually assaulted his 7-year-old daughter and his 6-year-old stepdaughter. You know, I didn't say anything nice about that guy. Should that guy all of a sudden have been let go because I was somewhat biased or something of that nature, even though all the evidence and he confessed and everything else pointed in that one direction? I don't think so. You know, when, you know, I was on a panel the other day and they were brought up some of the things that Proctor said. One of the things he said was something to the effect that that the homeowner is not going to get any heat because he's a Boston cop. And a lot of people stop at that. I had no idea what goes after it because I've never seen the first trial. I have no idea. I hadn't seen the first trial, and that didn't come up. I don't believe that came up in this trial. If it did, I didn't catch that. But from what I understand is there's more to it. And from all, I believe it was Kate from Masshole Mafia, I think is what she calls herself. You know, she had said that after that, it says, and all indications are that they had nothing to do with the crime. And I asked, when was this? Because that's important, right? You know, was this day one when this conversation happened that he came to this opinion? Or was this after the evidence had already pointed in that direction? Because, you know, day one, when I first arrested the guy for the sexual assault, you know, obviously I had my opinions about him for the arrest, but it wasn't until I uncovered the evidence when I really started to, you know, feel what I felt about the guy. Right. It wasn't until I got down to the details, which you guys don't want to know what these details were. The horrific details. That is when I was like, man, this guy's a piece of POS and a bunch of other things. A lot worse things. Yeah, at the end of the day, they're human beings. Now, I agree that officers should be held to a higher standard, and some of the things he said crossed the line, but that doesn't mean that a murderer should go free because his opinion on somebody who killed a cop, a brother in blue, so to speak. Yeah, I mean, if the evidence is pointing that way, it'd be one thing if the evidence didn't point that direction, or it'd be another thing if this was day one when he came out with that assessment, right? Before he even met her, before he talked to her, before he did anything. If that was what his assessment was, 100%, you guys got a case. But if it was like after the evidence came out and he's already done his investigation, he's already saw the evidence, he saw the broken tail light, he saw how drunk this lady is, he's probably talked to her. You know, we don't get to hear what she says because she's pleading the fifth, right? She's not going up there and testifying. So we don't know what she said, but she has talked to Proctor and to the other troopers at certain points. I don't know how much she said or what she has or hasn't said, but they've talked to her. They've got the evidence. They had her phone. They have the videos of the amount of shots that she was drinking that she even admitted to. She went down the line. She took she added 3 shots in one. And then she tried to blame John for being frugal and not wanting to waste it. Like everything is somebody else's fault with this lady. Everything is somebody else's fault, down to, you know, I didn't want to go this place. I didn't want to get out. He never came back out, so I left. You know, I thought he was cheating on me. Everything is somebody else's fault. I drank the drinks because he told me to do it. Everything is somebody else. No accountability with this woman. No accountability. And I think it's just disgusting of what she's done. But going back to what I started, I didn't want to touch this case with a 10-foot pole because I was afraid that I wasn't necessarily afraid. I was under the impression that there was something that was maybe perhaps nefarious with law enforcement in this case, given the history surrounding the area and whatnot. And honestly, like if it was just like normalness, then yeah, I probably would have covered it. But the fact that people were attacking the victim's family members, the brother of John O'Keefe, his mother, those type of folks, the witnesses in this case as well, how badly they were attacking. I didn't want to touch it. The only reason I did is because I actually looked at the evidence and I was like, this isn't no damn conspiracy. I was like, this is clearly what happened. And, I'll get people that'll tell me, oh, well, one officer told me, or one officer said that it was cracked. And I'm like, I don't care what somebody said they saw if I have a picture of it right here, like I do right here. Right. I trust my eyes. I have a saying out there. I was like, don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. Right. Or don't try to tell me it's raining. That's exactly what some people like in this case. They'll see the evidence like this and they're waiting for the piss to fall on them of some sort of explanation of, oh no, you know what? Proctor had a time machine. Oh, there it is. There's the explanation. Bring it on. It's rain. No. I can see with my own two eyes. I don't need the defense to try to sway me one way or the other, or the prosecution for that matter of fact either. And that's why when I first started looking into this case, a lot of people told me, why aren't you watching the trial? I was like, because it's biased information, whether it's coming from the prosecution or it's coming from the defense. Most so the defense, right? The prosecution doesn't hire people. They hire independent people that are looking for answers to solve crimes. They're not looking to try to get a guilty verdict or any of those things. They're trying to answer the questions that are in front of them. The defense is hiring an expert to battle that, to create a narrative that is to basically confuse the jury for the most part. And so now again, in the past, many years ago, there probably were times where law enforcement did some things in certain instances, right? But with today's technology and all that other stuff and the investigations that were going in, I don't think so. Well, anyways, I can see with my own two eyes. I rather look at the evidence that was presented and make my own decision based on the evidence alone, and not somebody's interpretation of the evidence. Because when I go and listen to somebody's interpretation of the evidence, for one, it's probably going to upset me because most of the people that I've come across, they don't even understand the evidence themselves to try to interpretate it. You know what I'm saying? So it is what it is. But no pieces were found until Proctor with his vehicle in Kent. No, that's not true though. I mean, and I think it was the SRT team that found the first pieces, not even Proctor. He wasn't even out there yet. That's just insane. And in fact, I think they were able to prove that the first pieces were found at like 4 something and or 5 o'clock, and that they didn't get to the Sally Port for about like 20 minutes later. So that's even 100% false. 100% false. Let's see. I don't know. I mean, people were funny. But again, that's why I tell people I'm psychic, because they can't believe that I know what I'm talking about. So I must be getting it right somehow. Let's see. We don't need to hear or see from Dr. Russell. Bring on Dr. Russell. I saw this one thing. I shared it on my Discord. Now, I don't agree with calling people names like, somebody called a creator an idiot. We don't need to do that. But in this video, there's a scenario where I think it's Hank. He's like drilling Dr. Russell and how she's changed her testimony and a bunch of different things. And it's great. I think it was from Boundless Millennial. I think that's his name. I might be wrong, but I put it in my Discord, guys. If you guys want to get on the Discord, become a member. You guys would love it. Let's see. I've been bit by a dog, guys. I can show you what dog bite look like. My brother did too. My brother got bit by a German Shepherd, a female German Shepherd. He got bit by a female German Shepherd that was not a trained police dog. Me and my brother had some bad couple months there. My brother got bit, and then about like 6 months later, I got bit. But my brother, he was working he works as a contractor, and he was inside of a house, and he was working with the homeowners, and he was working with one homeowner, and the second homeowner wasn't aware that he was there, and got home and just let his dog out, and the dog came running around the corner, saw my brother, bit him in the arm, released because it got scared. My brother pulled back and it released, and it got scared and it ran off. And completely similar to, I don't want to say similar to mine, somewhat. Mine are just larger because the dog that bit me was much larger. But yeah, completely different than what you see there. Let's see. But didn't Karen Reed say that, and these were in the clips, that, well, was breaking down some of the things she told Kerry Roberts that he was dead. She left voicemail saying nobody knows where you're at, before she knew that nobody knew where he was at. So prior knowledge or something. She said that in those clips that she expected to see him on the side of the road. Why would she expect to see him on the side of the road? Mind blown that people still want to say that she's somewhat innocent. She expected to see him on the side of the road, and she was questioning if she hit him. Now, if she saw him walk into the house, why would you even question that? Or if you saw him walk onto the lawn, why would you question that? In fact, she even went on to say in these clips that she thought maybe she did hit him at one point, because he was in the spot where she left him. Imagine that. And these are the clips that played in court of the things that she said. I think she also said, I know I said I hit him, but did I say it that many times? You know, to me, whether it's court TV and some of the guys that they have there, or some of these lawyers, or some of the FKR folks that are still arguing that this is some sort of conspiracy, I just think it's a lot of people that are that can't admit they were wrong about something. Maybe they can't come to themselves to understand the fact that they were supporting most likely a murderer. But then again, I mean, when you look at, like, for instance, that Luigi Mangione guy and the support he has, probably a lot of the same people, to be honest with you. All righty, guys. Well, I'm out of here. I wanted to say thank you to everybody. If you guys like this content, let me know. Let me know if you guys want me to continue to cover the Karen Reed case. I'm more than happy to. I find this case fascinatingly easy. It's easy and obvious of what happened. These dots are a lot clearer to me than the Bryan Kohberger case. And you guys know what I say about those dots in that case. You guys have a good night. Like, comment, subscribe, ring that notification bell. I'll see you guys probably tomorrow night. We'll talk about Bryan Kohberger if there's any updates. Peace out.